Okay, so this first one is for respiration, and this is called respiratory muscle strength training. And they strengthen the muscles, which can help improve speaking, swallowing, coughing, etc. The programs are usually inspiratory or expiratory, but they can be a combination of both, just depending on what the diagnosis is and what you want to improve. Typically, it's accomplished using a handheld device that provides resistance against inhalation and exhalation. But as you'll see in this, the device is not necessary because it is $60 and we do not have one. So, the hierarchy for treatment. First, if you were my patient, I would assess your baseline respiratory strength, determine what my targets for treatment are, if it's endurance, maximum strength, or something else. I would select a device because there's a variety of them on the market, or I would just do it without a device, which is what you're going to see. Decide the frequency for training. For example, is it like 5 times per week for 20 minutes? But the research doesn't say what the best dosage for therapy is. It just depends on the patient. And step 5 would be training the patient. Okay, so treatment strategy 1. This is an example of respiratory muscle strength training with the focus on expiration. So here's 2 goals that I wrote that you might see for this type of treatment strategy. Goal number 1, the patient will produce an MEP of at least 58.9 centimeters H2O in 85% of trials given minimal verbal cues. And another one is the patient will produce a verbal response of 5 words, averaging 50 decibels in 4 out of 5 trials, given a verbal prompt and minimal visual cues. Okay, so since it's expiration, we're working not only on the maximum pressure that can be used, but also the stamina involved. So if you don't have that handheld device that we were talking about, you can do blowing various objects across the table. This can be done with a cotton ball, a ping pong ball, or anything heavier. Obviously, the heavier it is, the more expiratory pressure that is required. So if we started with a cotton ball, I would say I just want you to blow this across the table at me, and do it yourself first so that they're more comfortable doing it. Like that. Good. You do it again. Good. And then you can try it with different things. You can also use ping pong balls. Oh. Okay. Yeah, good. And depending on your patient, that might be really difficult for them. So you'll just cue for a large inhale at the beginning and forcible exhale. Okay. And then I also said that this training can be inspiratory. So if you were focusing on inhalation, here's 2 goals that you could write for that. The patient will produce an MIP of at least negative 51.5 centimeters H2O in 85% of trials. And then I wrote another one that was more functional. The patient will take a deep breath rated by the patient as a 7 or higher on the comfortability scale for 80% of trials given minimal verbal cues. So if someone has a really hard time inhaling, you can add resistance to their inhale and work on it without a handheld device. You can use a straw because it takes more inspiratory pressure to inhale through a straw. So you would just give it to them and say, inhale for as long as you can, as hard as you can. And I can hear it, but you can also feel with your hand to see how much pressure they're using. Okay, so that's for respiration. Okay, so after they have adequate respiratory support, the very next step in speech is the ability to phonate. So here's some samples from the LSVT Loud program, which is developed for individuals with hypokinetic dysarthria, which is most normally associated with Parkinson's disease. These people have the issue where they're told they're speaking too quietly. They might be monopitch, monoloud, have reduced stress and inappropriate silences in their speech. Okay, so treatment hierarchy for this one is, well, it's always a 4-week treatment program, and it increases in complexity across the weeks. So it starts with words and phrases, then sentences, then reading paragraphs, and then normal conversation. So here's treatment strategy number 1, and this is a daily session task. So for all 4 weeks, this is one of the things that you will start with, regardless of who the patient is. It's maximum sustained phonation. So here's 2 goals that I wrote under this treatment. Patient will phonate ah for 10 to 15 seconds in 100% of attempts across 3 consecutive sessions, which if they have that respiratory support, they should be able to do it. It just is dependent on how loud they end up being. And then patient will respond to a greeting with appropriate loudness and vocal quality in 80% of opportunities independently. Okay, so in the actual treatment session, I would require a minimum of 15 repetitions of maximum sustained phonation, but I'll just have you do 1.
Okay.
Okay. So the goal is phonate ah for 10 to 15 seconds. So that literally, like, I'm going to time you, and I want you to go ah for as long as you can, until you run out of breath. Since you're typically developing adult female, I want to see at least 16 seconds. So take a deep breath, and whenever you're ready. Okay, well, you're at 20.92, so that's pretty high. I feel like you probably could have kept going, too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So yeah, you would do that 15 times, and you can cue them visually, louder or longer, or inhale more deeply at the beginning. Okay, treatment strategy 2. Here's an example of something you would see in week 4. Week 4 is the very last week that you have this person, so this is going to be the highest level of complexity. Week 4 example task is conversation. So 2 goals that I wrote for this patient. Patient will use increased effort, like a 7 to 9 out of 10, via the use of the Likert scale for functional loudness without cues in challenging communicative environments. And patient will self-correct unintelligible phrases with 80% accuracy during structured conversation, given minimal visual cues from the communication partner. So I would just engage you in conversation and try to distract you from the fact that you're trying to remember to use a loud voice. So here's an example of what a conversation looks like. Hi, what did you do today?
Today I watched The Bachelorette, and we played Mario Party, and I had a lot of fun doing that.
Oh, who did you play Mario Party with?
I played with you and your brother and his girlfriend.
Who won?
Your brother won, and I'm very upset about that.
Good. So, the longer we talked, if the patient starts to get a little lower with their voice, however you've been cueing throughout your time with them is what you should use. So you can do this. I like this one for increased volume. And if they can do it themselves and catch it, that's even better. Okay, so that's for phonation. So after you have established respiration and phonation, the next step for clear speech is resonance, and using it correctly in different areas. So the treatment hierarchy for resonance is very similar to that of articulation, meaning that you're going to slowly increase the complexity, easy to hard, so sounds in isolation, sounds in words, phrases, sentences, reading, conversation. Treatment strategy 1 is discrimination training, because you can't expect someone to use good resonance if they can't hear the difference themselves. So here's 2 goals that I wrote for this. The patient will identify nasal versus non-nasal sounds and words with 80% accuracy given verbal cues. And the patient will explain the physiologic differences between nasal and non-nasal sounds with 100% accuracy after direct teaching. Okay, so for the beginning discrimination training, the clinician will demonstrate hypernasal and normal sounds, and the patient just has to tell you which one it is. So nasal sounds, here's the direct teaching. Nasal sounds are sounds where the airflow is directed through your nose. So M's and N's and ings. So man, nasal. But non-nasal sounds are pretty much everything else. The sound goes through your mouth. So I want you to listen to the first sound in these words and tell me if it's nasal or non-nasal. Okay. Man.
Nasal.
Yeah. Pan.
Not nasal.
Uh-huh. Night.
Nasal.
Uh-huh. Tight.
Not nasal.
Yeah, good. Okay, so they can tell the difference. After you've established that, treatment strategy 2, tactile feedback. So, goals. The patient will produce plosives in all positions of words at word level with 80% accuracy given verbal and visual cues. The patient will describe the intraoral pressure needed for plosive with 100 plosives with 100% accuracy after direct teaching. So, for example, if my resonance is off, it's because of insufficient velopharyngeal closure. So let's say I'm trying to say the word pop. If I can't increase that pressure without the sound going through my nose, then when I try to say pop, it's going to sound like mop. And that's obviously a nasal sound, and we don't want that to be a nasal sound. So you can figure out if your plosives are good and if you have the closure that you need to produce plosives to build intraoral pressure by just putting your hand in front of your mouth. So I would take your hand and put it in front of my mouth. And I want you to tell me about the air pressure that you feel when I make these sounds. Tell me if you can feel it or not. Pop.
Yes.
Yes. Mop.
No.
Penny.
Yes.
Cat.
No.
Yeah. Okay. And now I want you to do it in front of your mouth. Say pop.
Pop.
Did you feel it?
Yes.
Good. Now say cat.
Cat.
So that's the tactile feedback that they're going to be using. So they'll know not only because they can hear it, but because they can feel whether or not the sound that they were aiming for is the sound that they produced. Okay. All right. So then we can move into articulation exercises. So this is for dysarthria specifically. Orofacial exercises incorporated with a traditional articulation therapy approach can be useful for this population because exercises of the articulators can lead to the greater precision and timing and strength needed for the proper production of speech. And traditional articulation approaches targeting orofacial exercises have been proven to be effective in improving intelligibility in people with dysarthria post-CVA. So here's the treatment hierarchy for the orofacial exercises. 1, movements of single muscles. 2, sequenced movements of muscles. 3, diadocho kinetic rates for rapid and alternating movements of sound sequences. And your overall goal is just increased speech intelligibility. And then the hierarchy for traditional articulation, pretty obvious, increase the complexity, do sounds in isolation, do words, do phrases, do sentences, do reading, do conversation, and don't move on to the next level until they've mastered the one before it. Okay, so here's a treatment strategy for orofacial exercises. And these can target any of the articulators, but I chose soft palate exercises. Here's 2 goals that I wrote for that. Goal number 1, patient will increase number of productions of diadocho kinetic rate of PA by 5 productions given pre-teaching and verbal cues in 4 out of 5 opportunities for 3 consecutive sessions. And patient will hold air in cheeks for 10 seconds on 4 out of 5 trials given minimal verbal cues. Okay, so for these soft palate exercises, I'm just going to tell you to do some things and I want you to do them. Okay, yawn. Good. Puff out your cheeks. Keep them puffed out and breathe in and out through your nose. Good. Now I want you to puff out your cheeks and blow this air through the straw. Can you try again?
What?
Yeah, it's hard.
I don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Now hum. Stop humming. Hum. Stop humming. Okay. Now for this one, I want you to puff out your cheeks, and as you release the air through your lips, say the p sound. Good. Again. Good. Because those are all things that you cannot do if your soft palate isn't elevated. Okay. Good. Treatment strategy 2 is just word level articulation drilling. Here's 2 goals that I wrote for that. Patient will produce a CVC word presented via visual stimuli given verbal prompts and pre-teaching of sounds with 80% accuracy for 3 consecutive therapy sessions. Patient will use a slower rate of speech in response to moments of unintelligibility during conversation in 8 out of 10 opportunities given minimal visual cues from the communication partner. Okay. Tips for teaching articulation. First, teach an exaggeration of the speech sounds and encourage them to use a slower rate of speech. This is assuming she's a reader. Go ahead.
Cat.
Good.
Pen. Saw.
Good. So yeah, CVC words, and I didn't need to cue for any sort of slower rate or exaggeration of speech sounds because they were all intelligible. And last but not least, we have prosody. Okay, so here's an example of loudness pitch variation treatment. Prosody includes intonation, stress, and rhythm of speech. It makes speech sound natural, and the goal of this treatment is to improve intelligibility. Okay, here's the goals hierarchy. You want the patient to be able to do a continuous tone from the top of their pitch range to the bottom of their pitch range. You want continuous phonation when they're repeating phrases. You want appropriate loudness while they read a short passage. You want appropriate loudness during conversation with an unfamiliar communication partner. And you want them to be able to mimic various loudnesses and pitches during short phrases. So, my first treatment strategy is just reading passages. Here's 2 goals that I wrote for it. Patient will maintain appropriate loudness and rate while reading a short passage in a clinical setting with 1 to 2 visual cues in 8 out of 10 sentences. Patient will pause at appropriate intervals during conversation in 70% of trials given minimal visual cues. So she has a reading passage, and generally you're going to have them read it 3 times. The first time, habitual, just how they normally would. The second time, louder than they normally would. And the third time, slower than they normally would. So just go ahead and read it once how you normally would.
Okay. Hampel has a website, which is patriciahampel.com, and it includes her biography, a list and summary of interviews, and promotions of her work. There were also posts about different readings she would attend and workshops that she was helping out with. However, the website has not been updated since 2018. The last post was on August 20th, 2018, saying she was going to be doing a reading by Elliott Bay Bookshop in Washington.
Can you do that again, but slower and breathe more?
Yes. Hampel has a website, which is patriciahampel.com, and it includes her biography, a list and summary of interviews, and promotions of her work. There were also posts about different readings she would attend and workshops she was helping out with. However, the website has not been updated since 2018. The last post was on August 20th, 2018, saying she was going to be doing a reading at Elliott Bay Bookshop in Washington.
Good job. So during that, the clinician will provide cues to adjust loudness, pitch, and rate. Okay, treatment strategy number 2. is called auditory bombardment and imitation. Here's 2 goals that I wrote for that. Patient will mimic various loudness, pitch volumes, and ranges during short phrases in 8 out of 10 trials given visual cues. Patient will read a sentence using appropriate intonation for the given sentence type in 8 out of 10 trials given minimal verbal and visual cues. Okay, so something that I like for this is you have one sentence. So the sentence that I wrote says, he said he liked her. But each time you read it, you put your stress on a different word. And it changes the meaning of the sentence depending on where you put the stress at. So if they... First step is them being able to imitate. So I want you to repeat after me the same way I say it. He said he liked her.
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 Good. So that's an imitation. And then the next step is that you would want them to be able to do it by themselves. So I want you to read this sentence and I want you to emphasize the word that I point at.
He said he liked her. 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 He said he liked her.
Good job. And that is prosody treatment.